right. Welcome to the first ever Level Up podcast. There was never a podcast before this. Don't bother searching Google for it. It doesn't exist. We never
4 years in the making, something like that, I think.
Yeah, we've just been practicing.
Yeah.
Let's go around the table and introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Scott.
Penelope.
Justin, Game of Thrones enthusiast.
Game of Thrones battered wife is more like it.
Yeah. I don't even know why I said that.
I'm Greg, and I'm Justin's beard enthusiast.
Tim.
And Sean. And tonight, hopefully, we're going to talk about comic book movies and the comic book industry in general. To get us started, let's talk about the fact that comic book movies are the biggest thing going right now, and have been for the last 10 years. We've got, most recently, X-Men Days of Future Past had an incredible opening. Amazing Spider-Man 2, I think, did over 100 million its first weekend. That's just the two of like the four that have opened so far. What else has opened this year? Captain America Winter Soldier.
Which was great.
Incredible, yeah.
If you count genre movies, Godzilla hit.
Yeah, not quite a comic book, but still kind of in that vein.
Yeah.
But long story short, these movies are phenomenally successful, massively. But the comic book industry is continuing to struggle. It's doing better, but it's nowhere near the levels of what these movies do. You know, and if a movie opens to 120 million, it might take 10 years for a single title to hit that much. And that's the best of the best, like Justice League or Spider-Man or Batman. So what's going on there? Let's talk about why that is.
Well, actually, there's a weird point I'd like to bring up real quick. You just mentioned 2 DC and 1 Marvel, but most of the movies that actually make money are all Marvel.
DC ones do well too, but the same thing holds for X-Men. Actually, I had the statistics here from a couple of years. This is from 2013, but the X-Men did 194 million from 2002 to 2012 for comics, which sounds good, but that's a decade.
Yeah.
That happens in 2 weeks at the movie theaters. So why do so many people love to go see movies about superheroes, but they're not interested in reading the stories that the movies are drawing from?
It's relative. I think if the movies weren't there, the comics would be doing much worse.
I think that's possible.
You know what I mean? I don't think they would be even good to the level they are right now.
I don't know about that, just because back, when you had the original Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, and these really, really bad movies that came out, the unproduced or unshowed Fantastic Four movie. Comics were doing well back then. I mean, that's at their peak. Granted, I know it's speculation because of the different kind of covers, but I don't think there's it's already, the comics now are weak and aren't as good as they were before. And there's only, between 30 and 100,000 people reading a book a month, even less sometimes. And I don't know if it could have, maybe it could get worse. I don't know.
Well, they were definitely popular. It was a big deal, comics then.
That was a trend then. Like you said, speculation.
It was all about speculation and selling them. You would have Death Superman or Chromium covers.
You don't think people were reading these stories?
Somewhere, but not at the... Well, in the 90s, no. I would say in the 50s, 60s, yes. 70s, 80s.
Oh, yeah, definitely through the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, I will go back through some of my circulation in the back of the comics, in the letter pages that would have, like, some sort of circulation. The lowest tier comics, like, for instance, like, I guess, like a Guardians of the Galaxy book back then wasn't near as popular as it would be now, but that sold, like, 300,000 copies. Whereas, now barely anything breaks 100,000.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like unheard of now for anything to touch it.
Well, I think one of the reasons that people are reading less comic books is because there's so many other things to do now, entertainment-wise. In the 60s, 70s, even in the 80s, you could go to the movies, you could watch TV, or you could read a comic, So now you can play video games, you got all this kind of stuff going on. There's other things to do, so that might be part of it, too.
Yeah.
And with that stuff, you're constantly distracted by it. Like, we all have supercomputers in our pockets right now, with our cell phones. And we're constantly connected to the internet, and the internet is just infinite distractions.
Well, do you think that proliferation of technology could lead to a boom in comics? Maybe not the physical comics, but digital?
I definitely think it can. Comixology and its success, as, there's your phones and tablets and whatnot as e-readers, there's definitely been an increase in that. Plus, it gives a lot of people who would say used to have to pitch an idea to, like, Marvel, DC, yada yada, can now just make one, put it online, and then everyone can just read it.
Our friends at Super are doing that now.
Yeah, their issue 4 of their comic just went up on Comixology for it's their first digital only issue.
Do they know how it did? Or is it
no, I haven't asked them. It went up like I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, so they should probably have some real numbers now.
But still, it still doesn't quite answer the question because people care about these stories. I would say The Walking Dead is a counterexample to this because that shows such a massive success, and then the comics have blown up because of that.
Oh yeah,
and that's our best-selling item.
Yeah.
For close to one of our best-selling items. When we have it in stock, we sell every Walking Dead graphic novel we have, and that's got to be because of the show.
I think a big factor is. I'm gonna offend a whole bunch of comic creators. We're never gonna get anybody for comic.
Burn bridges.
Be
It
real.
cuts a lot of the crap. Like when the newer movies now focus more on a story arc that everybody loves, and they cut the crap out of it and try and focus on the major events.
Okay.
Well, that's not. I
don't agree.
I mean, to admit, possibly, but the way Marvel does it now, it's one event after another. So they see like that type of thing. I think.
But there's still issues where I'm just like, well, this was a waste. Nothing happened. It could have happened in 30 seconds.
Well, the problem with that is they write for trades now, so they need to. So there's these arcs that they do. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. Yeah. This is just how it is. The arcs they do are made to be in a 5 to 7 issue trade paperback, so they could sell later. Because I think a lot of people who read comics, or people who are just getting into it, they kind of want a full story instead of being one issue in a month or 2 issues a month, depending on what they do. Yeah. So, for instance, like what Sean was saying about Walking Dead, the single issues only sell about 75,000 copies a month.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly the numbers for the graphic novels, but they sell constantly. Volume 1 of Walking Dead constantly sells 2,000 or 3,000 reorder wise, through different comic shops a month. So there's interest in it, I think, like you said, but I think it's the stories that the arcs of stories that make sense.
That's what I mean. Like you have this arc that you can remove a lot of the nonsense from in a hour and a half movie, and then focus on what people would like, or more action, or whatever your audience aim is.
I think that's unfair. Writing for a comic and writing for a movie are two totally different animals.
But at the same time, I think what he's trying to get at is why do people care about the movies, but they don't seem to care about the comics? And that could be a valid point. Yeah. Is that they're more streamlined, they're easier to digest, it's just a story.
I won't argue that they're easier to digest because you don't need to have like 70 plus years worth of backstory, which I think is a major part of the people. I'm sure there's a decent number of people that say watch Captain America: Winter Soldier, like, oh, I want to read Captain America. I liked that. But then there's like such a convoluted history, and it's so intimidating. Like when you come into the store, it's like issue 625 of something.
Yeah,
scared to jump in.
Yeah.
See, I see what you're saying with that, but I think comics, the way they're written now, you don't need to know the backstory for some of these characters. You might need to know the backstory of the story that's going on, but you don't need to know Captain America fought the Red Skull in World War II or whatever it may be. I see what you're saying completely. It's just I don't find that now all that continuity is a problem. I think it's people who think it's a problem.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's a perception
problem,
not an
big
actual
time
problem.
Yeah, because I know there's the philosophy that circulates in comic creator communities is everyone's issue is every issue is somebody's first.
Mm-hmm.
So there was always a big push to like everything needs to be accessible on a month-to-month basis. Which is generally pretty true. As long as you know, like, Peter Parker's bitten by a radioactive spider, you can read Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah. You can just jump right in. In fact, that's how I really got into comics. Is I just jumped. When I started getting into comics in the 90s, trade paperbacks weren't really a thing. So you just jump right into a story and just roll with it a little while. There's usually a recap page right in the beginning that just gets you up to speed with what you need to know for that issue.
So, in comparison, I know literary books do very well when there's a popular movie.
Right.
So what we're asking is why don't comics?
Right.
But how do we know they're not? How do we know there wouldn't even be a comic book industry without these movies?
We don't know for sure because it's been 10 years now. But there's, I was reading an article, the same article I just referenced earlier today, where Some books seem to have a bump from a movie's release, and other books seem to dip after a movie's release. And this article tried to say that it was because of the quality of the movie, but then they presented things like the Wolverine. The Wolverine didn't make a dent in the Wolverine sales. You know, the comics did just as well as they were doing before a crappy Wolverine Origins came out that everybody hated.
That was fantastic.
So, you know, it doesn't seem to have enough of a trend. Maybe we need to look at more information. Maybe there's more numbers out there, but it didn't seem like there was enough that you could draw a straight line and say, okay, yes, this is the trend.
Yeah. And I mean, 10 to 15 years ago, the movies were all crap.
Yeah.
Well, not all. That's not fair.
To the 90s,
but
the
like
90s were such an anomaly with comics. It was such a weird.
You're
time.
right, but go back to the 80s. Go back to the 70s. It
Right.
was still around. That industry was still there and still making money,
Yeah.
even without those movies.
Well,
Then they created crappier movies because they just tried to pump them out and realized, oh, we should probably write some more
Yeah,
for this.
think of the 60s with Spider-Man. They had that live-action TV show where the guy swinging from a giant rope.
I'm thinking like
Wow.
when Superman the movie came out, what happened to Superman comics around then?
I don't know. I wasn't
You would
born.
think.
Yeah, I don't have the information.
I'm just wondering, like, what was the first comic book movie? Really, what was the first?
I would argue that's probably the first blockbuster one.
Yeah, it's definitely because, you know, going back further than that, you had TV shows and you
Yeah.
had radio plays, but you didn't have a lot of, like, wide-release, high-budget, blockbuster Hollywood
The
movies.
Adam West Batman movie came out in theaters in like '68, I think.
But by that same token, that's right around the time that the term blockbuster even came into existence. That was shortly after Jaws, and Jaws is credited as being the first blockbuster. So, you know, it wasn't really possible before then. But yeah, it does seem like they don't. You know, your point's a good one. Like maybe the industry would have withered and died without these movies, but it hasn't. But it's not. It's limping along. You know, Gregg said Walking Dead, which is one of our best. The trades are always selling like 3,000 a month per volume. That's good, but think about that number. I mean, how many people are in New York City alone? There's millions. That's such a tiny fraction of one of our cities in our country. That's one country in the world. Like, how are these books selling such a small number?
Not to mention they have, 2 million viewers easy every episode?
Right,
Like,
just
Easy
viewers
to
of the
sit in
show.
front of. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
But-
the movie's easy to say, hey, let's go to movies, and it's it's an event where you go and see a thing. It's different than sitting down and investing in a book.
I can
It's true.
read it in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, maybe 30.
I'm not trying to
but-
tell you out of it.
Yeah, but
But again, like it seems like that might be the perception is it does take longer
okay.
to devote to it.
And for The Walking Dead, I mean, for me as a as a store owner, since people work in a store, every time Walking Dead comes back on there, volume 1, 2, 3 always resell. So there is a correlation with that, and that's why, like I said earlier, like I see on these charts that volume 1 regularly gets reordered 2,000 to 3,000 copies. Volume 1. I'm not sure about the rest of the volumes off the top of my head, but
sure it
volume
tapers
1,
off each
I'm sure it does. But volume 1 is consistently getting out there, and more people are reading it. Granted, not 2 million people. It's
Right.
probably 500,000 maybe units were sold total. I'm not 100% sure on that, but
I think
have to look that up.
I think that even though these movies have such a wide mass crossover appeal, I still think the act of going into a store and buying and reading a comic book is considered way too nerdy.
Yeah, let's
I think,
There's
I think a
definitely
lot
a
of that
stigma.
stigma has left, though. I
Yeah.
think
A lot of it has.
it's
but
not
there's
just a
still
kids thing anymore.
No. It's
a lot of our customers are adults. Yeah, you
Oh,
know
yeah.
that.
I
but
know.
not all of them. And we still get people who walk in or walk up to the store and they go, "Ew, I'm not going in there."
Yeah.
It doesn't happen as often, but it did happen. I mean, that's a reality.
I just
that
think the
people-
stigma's not that as big as it was.
It's not
I
as
don't-
bad as it used to be, but it still exists.
It's not as bad. It still is there.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other topic. And
Yeah,
we
yeah.
should probably
Am
talk
I going to
about
sound
that.
like an idiot when I say this? I may. I'm
Okay,
gonna
go
throw it
ahead.
out there.
Go for it.
When we look at the numbers these movies make, is that domestic or international?
Sometimes both. It depends.
Because is comic books, this is a broad term, but are comic books pretty much an American thing? Is it really just us who the bulk of the comic book reading and buying here in the States?
I don't know because I don't see any numbers being released for.
Because we might be looking
UK
at
or
domestic
anything.
comic
No,
book numbers for the most part.
Because a lot of times,
compared to worldwide movie numbers, which is insane money.
For instance, my friend Alan, you all know Alan actually, or
Yeah.
Penelope knows Alan. He got me a comic. I think Japanese or Spanish, doesn't matter. But it was, not for what it was, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They were close, but it doesn't matter. The point,
Sorry, everyone.
they were in Japanese or, doesn't matter, again.
It's the same thing.
Same thing, doesn't matter. But the way they are made, there's 3 to 4 issues in
To trade?
in a volume. It's like a trade, but not a trade.
So it's almost like a manga? Like
It's sort of, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're distributed way differently in America than they are in Japan,
I just feel
UK.
like I don't know about now, but I know back in the Golden Age, Silver Age, comics. Britain had books too, and there was actually there's actually
Britain had their
British
books.
versions of American books like Tales of G.I. Joe and that kind of thing. But the bulk of comic book sales is inherently
Yes.
United States, North American thing.
I think so, yes. I mean, also with that, to kind of going back a little bit, with kind of going back talking about book movies and comic book movies, Marvel and DC do a really crappy job promoting their comics.
They do an awful job.
But these movies get multi-million-dollar budgets to put it on TV going, go see X-Men Days of Futures Past. You see it 8 times a day, the commercial.
everywhere.
You never
The
seen a
Carl's
commercial
Jr.
for a
commercial.
Look at
Yeah.
the return they get from it.
Exactly.
It's funny you should say that, actually, because I just pulled up Box Office Mojo, and X-Men Days of Future Past had a $200 million production budget. That's crazy. It hasn't made that back
absurd.
yet, by the way.
It will. It's probably not even worldwide yet.
It is.
Is it?
But to answer your question about if it's just America or if it's the world that cares about this stuff, Captain America 2 did a domestic gross of $255 million. The worldwide summary was $709 million.
Wow.
So significantly
And then
more.
DVD sales after that.
Right. So I mean that's creeping up on $1 billion. Clearly people care. And that's Captain America. That shouldn't have appeal anywhere else but America.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the numbers. Internationally, movies do insane. Domestically, they're huge. Then once it goes international, it is insane. And we're comparing that to possibly a high percentage of just domestic comic book sales.
So let's just look at the domestic, $255 million.
Yeah, okay, it's still huge number.
How much did Captain America sell in May? That's since what? When did that come out? Beginning of May?
Something like that.
No, it was March. So that's
Yeah.
been out for a while.
Yeah.
All right, I guarantee you the Captain America's
About 40,000.
Yeah,
units.
yeah, right. That's crazy.
Well,
What
put it
is
this way,
disparity?
It is a crazy disparity.
40,000
Yeah,
units
I'm not gonna
to
argue that.
At
40,000
$4 a pop.
no 40,000 units to comic book specialty markets. I don't know about like newsstand, which would be like Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Toys R Us. For whatever reason, they don't give those numbers out.
So
I don't understand why.
so even-
but still, even though,
Yeah, even taking that into consideration, you could say that they get 1 million, which would be ludicrous compared to the 40,000, and that's still less than 1%. It's 0.5% of what they did.
Movies get much more respect than comic books do. Just in general, in people's eyes.
You think it's cooler to go to a movie than it is to read a
Of
comic?
course, to go see a big action movie.
It's a social thing.
Yeah, I was
You
about to say
can't
that
read a
earlier.
comic book with, your friends. I couldn't sit here and read a comic book with you guys, but we can all go to the movies together. And we can talk about it at length afterwards.
But with the internet now, you can go to a chat room, blog room, whatever they're called nowadays. Whatever they call
I don't
nowadays.
want to talk to those comic nerds.
Get on whatever that internet is.
The comic book resources, all their forums. I'm sorry, forums. That's the word.
You could go to a blog room in one of those countries. Spain or Japan.
Spain and Japan, they're the same. But you can talk to them. And I understand it's more sociably,
Yeah.
like going out with friends.
It's also like, I don't want to sound rude, it's almost like a lowest common denominator kind of thing. Like, anybody can go to a movie. Anybody can get up and go right now. We can go and see a movie this minute.
Yeah.
We can't go to a comic shop right now because they're closed.
That's true.
I mean,
You know,
we could go to one.
Well,
Sucks to be everybody else.
That's also why you guys get mad, and I do too, at the boiled down stories they do from these story arcs in the movies, because it is lowest common denominator. They're trying to get everyone they can to like it.
I think that's
The
true.
books might do that too, though. I don't know now. I haven't read a new
I
comics
think
in a
that's.
while.
I think that's
did
only.
you just say you haven't read any new comics in a while?
I haven't.
So he's guilty too.
Yeah, no, I actually personify this because I haven't read a new comic book in
But I'm
months.
there first to see the movies.
Yeah, I make time out of my schedule to make sure I see that movie. But to go back a second, I don't think it's entirely fair to say they're watered down for the lowest common denominator anymore. We just had X-Men. I think it's a perfect example of they didn't even try to dumb that down. And maybe there was a shot of Hugh Jackman's ass to get everybody involved.
I know I was
Everybody?
about to that.
Right? Did anyone dislike that shot? I think that was universal appeal.
I don't like him as a person, so I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah, but that
As a
was
I don't-
person.
chiseled.
I hate his
As
face.
a
Wow,
person.
he's never come to
I
our
wasn't
store.
talking about his face.
He's gonna listen to this.
I have a
Yeah.
spoiler for you. He was never gonna.
You never know.
So, but
He might
it
come
was-
out of spite now.
It was,
Yeah.
it was such a comic book movie that they didn't. They may have changed things, but it was still like there was crazy stuff happening, and they didn't stop to explain it. And I don't think it's fair to say it was watered down for the masses.
Yeah.
But with that too, I think the masses like action movies, and I feel like X-Men wasn't a total like. There's a good scene in the beginning, good scene at the end. There's some mixed action in between, but I feel that that people are kind of go to these movies just to kind of see explosions and these big fight scenes, and they don't really care about the story as much as some people might.
I would argue for like Winter Soldier was a prime example of like that's an espionage movie. Sure, there was action in it, but that wasn't the focus. The focus was all the plot and the story, and there was a lot of it, and there was a lot going on.
Yeah, and same with X-Men. I mean, people may go for the explosions, but there was large chunks of that movie where nothing action-y was happening.
Oh no, and that's what I mean by that. But I think they're going expecting these cool fight scenes or
Well,
whatever.
it's like how Watchmen became a flop because they were marketing it as a big summer action movie, and that's not what Watchmen is.
Yeah.
And when people finally saw it, they're like, "Oh, this movie was stupid because there was that one scene of action." And
Yeah.
I mean, there's more than that, but
Well, you
But
know,
for the most part, it was very true to the comic.
yes,
it's as close as you're going to get.
So, do we think that there's a stigma attached to comic books still?
I think there definitely is.
Okay.
I think there is, but I don't think it's what it used to be. And I don't think that statement is nearly as bad. It used to be like you're a nerdy kid in your basement reading your little comic book, and it's not that anymore, dude.
People still think that, though.
Yeah, but people do think that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yo,
absolutely.
With
yeah.
how successful these movies are, people really still think that.
Oh, yeah.
Some people do, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot less than used to.
I think that's true, but that
I
doesn't
think
mean
it's
it
true,
doesn't
too,
happen. Go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say also. I think maybe people might think there is since it's a monthly thing. Oh, I don't have the money for this for this book every month or whatever. Even though in reality it's like $50 a year. If you just want to follow one comic.
Yeah, I was gonna say
just
it's more than
$4 a
$50
month.
for me, but that's
No, but if you want to follow, because you go see X-Men and you're like, oh, I love X-Men, and you just want an X-Men book.
Yeah.
Bad example because there's like 18 X-Men books out there, but
Well, use Avengers in wait.
There's a million
No,
Avengers.
use Batman as an example.
That ties it into something that I think Penelope said earlier. You can't just go to a comic shop right now to see this, to read a comic. It's tough to remember that, it comes out on the third week of every month. Like, sometimes it doesn't, but then...
sometimes there are 5 Wednesdays, so you're not sure which Wednesday it's gonna come out.
It's it kind of takes some effort to keep up with them, and then the graphic novels themselves. Like, if you just want to go for the graphic novels, you still like. Sometimes they have a release date. Sometimes it's hardcover first, and you don't want the hardcover, and you have to wait for the soft cover. It is kind of it takes some effort, which is a barrier to read comics.
And besides cool movies, there is zero marketing for comic books.
Well, that's an entirely other subject. I want to talk about that too.
Zero.
I saw a Death of the Family commercial. It was like 10 seconds, and I was like, "What the hell did I just see?"
Oh, they exist.
Really?
Yeah,
They
I was
exist.
like, really on computer or on network.
I remember
I don't
in the
remember.
80s seeing them on TV, actually.
Really?
Yeah, remember they had commercials. Here I go, G.I. Joe. They had commercials for the G.I. Joe comic, but done by the Sunbelt art people. It looked like the cartoon, but there was different voices. It was really weird. It would kind of throw you off from watching the cartoon. But they were awesome comic book commercials.
Really?
Look them up on YouTube. They're really cool.
Okay.
I'll just say this podcast series that we've tried out that we're doing is probably the most marketing done for comic books in like 10 years.
Well, there's a ton of comic
All
books.
right,
And I think the thing about like on the retailer side, it feels like that Marvel and DC and whomever IDW, Image, they rely on the retailers to promote their books. They promote to the retailer, and then as a retailer, we're supposed to promote for them, which is hard to do.
And
Yeah.
we're so small.
That's what I mean,
There's
like-
so few of us. Most of them aren't rolling in cash.
Yeah.
We're not a major corporation.
Yeah.
Like, there's only small local comic shops. We can't all band together to make a
And that's why I don't
Batman
agree
comic.
with it. Like, I think
Or
it's a
the
bad
Batman
business
commercial.
practice
Yeah.
for that.
You can get something like GameStop to advertise your game, and they do. Like, I see more GameStop commercials for a new release than I see the actual game commercials.
Don't say their name for free.
But
Bleep that out.
we'll bleep that out. They who shall not be named.
Do people just not read books anymore?
That's That's a fair point.
No, but like you were talking about,
Well, they get a
Harry
boost.
Potter books and you know all that.
But that I would say that those are the exceptions, and then you hear in the news constantly that bookstores have to close and the book sales are down. I don't think that they're too dissimilar. I think when you look at the boost that they get from movies, that's where there's a disparity between comics and regular books. But you're right. I mean, people don't read. There was a study done recently that said something like 94% of adults won't finish a book after they're out of school.
I read that.
Game of Thrones is a prime example. Started as a book, turned into both a comic and a TV show, and the comic does 15,000 units, maybe. Like,
Oh yeah.
So it's just the medium.
Yeah, I feel like it's
working.
got to be the
lend
medium
itself
itself.
to the medium as well, though. Maybe we're
Dude, they have over 2 million viewers pretty much all the time. But
one less starting this week.
we can talk about that later.
Again, going back to that,
you killed my wife.
It was his
Dynamite.
sister, not his wife.
They're from Dorne. It could be both.
That's just insulting.
Dynamite does not promote this
Not
book.
real.
Again, they're leaving it as a retailer as us
Yeah.
to be like, hey, look, there's a Game of Thrones book.
Yeah.
Buy it.
Yeah.
Where the Game of Thrones TV show is all over the commercial all over TV.
All over everywhere.
Over
Yeah.
everywhere. Again, it comes to the as a retailer, we have to spend money to advertise these things, and like Sean said, none of us are rich. As I don't know if any comic retailer owner, store shop owner is rich and
Midtown
grown
probably
in
does all right.
Midtown and possibly Mile High and some
Yeah.
other ones here and there, but for the most part, like you said, they're small mom and pop stores. They clear $500,000 a year, maybe.
Yeah, they're not.
Maybe. Yeah.
Here's a
Yeah.
question: Have comic book movies been based on specific titles that someone could go into, like Days of Future Past? I can go in my comic shop and say, "Hey, do you guys have X-Men: Days of Future Past?" Has there ever been comic
for
book
Vendetta.
movies specifically?
Yeah.
Watchmen, V for Vendetta.
Days of Future Past,
Amazing
as you just said.
Spider-Man.
Well, Amazing Spider-Man's a little bit more tricky because it's
I'm
just
going
the title.
just title.
Right, but that's just the title, so that's a little
You
weird.
mean
like-
actually based the storyline?
I'm
of
just
the title
wondering,
and all
like,
that?
if I, like you
Quite a
guys are
few.
saying, like about the books, translating into comics, into movies or TV
300
shows.
technically?
Winter Soldier's
Yeah.
pretty
Sin City.
close.
Like
There's
if
a ton.
I like Walking Dead, I can walk into not just a comics shop. I can go into any bookstore, anywhere, go online.
You should go to a
and-
comic
and
shop.
I should.
Yeah.
But I can go in there and say, I want to read about The Walking Dead, and
Yeah.
I will have The Walking Dead, and I can walk out with the thing, with the name on it of the thing
Yes.
that I already like, and I can leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, superheroes, it's a bit
Our comics a little
trickier.
different.
Yeah.
Maybe
Sometimes.
that's part of it.
With superhero stuff,
Because
there's no Man of Steel book, but they just had a movie called Man of Steel.
There...
Not
There
right.
wa- there was.
There
There
was
was one,
There's not
yeah.
one right now.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a Man of Steel comic, I think,
No, but I
since
think what-
like the 90s.
What Penelope's saying is like you can go into now on Days of Future Past. There's the exact title is pretty much what the movie
Yeah,
was.
I'm
You
wondering-
get that story.
Marvel
yeah.
DC not so much as but like some other books. Like,
Yeah, a
like
lot of the graphic
the
novels.
non-traditional comic book movies.
Yeah,
Like
Watchmen's a good example.
another good
Very good
example that movie Two Guns with Mark Wahlberg and what's his face
I think that's
Denzel
a
Washington.
Transformer.
That was
Oh,
that,
God.
that's a comic. You could go in the store and buy
Yeah.
the graphic novel, which would be
Like Mark
the movie.
Kick-Ass is another one. There's
Yeah.
a ton of
Yes, is a great
independent...
example,
Yeah.
yeah.
As
So.
far as like the superheroes go, though, they just kind of lift storylines here and there. It's not always the same.
And it seems like also too the comics seem to kind of move into being more like the movie.
I mean, what's
definitely.
That's a really good
definitely
point
happens,
because
yeah.
they typically they'll try to coincide a start of a new storyline in the comic when the movie comes out.
which is annoying.
Yeah, like Amazing
Amazing
Spider-Man,
Spider-Man,
for
yeah.
instance. Yeah, just came back. Peter Parker is now Spider-Man again, and then Electro was on the cover.
Electro's
because
the
Electro's
villain.
in the movie.
He came back. New Amazing Spider-Man #1 came out the exact same week. Amazing Spider-Man #2 hit theaters.
Yeah.
And that's them trying to push the comic books.
Yeah, at least they're trying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Amazing Spider-Man 1 is an example of a comic that did extremely well.
Over 500,000 units.
Yes.
But again,
Excuse my.
thanks. But it's 500,000. It's a tremendous success for comics, and it still seems like a joke of a number.
What was the drop off on 2?
That number is in
Oh,
yeah.
man, I can only imagine.
If it's standard attrition, 33% less. So
Which is crazy.
Yeah, we're talking hundreds of thousands of comics less now.
Yeah, you can get people in the store for an issue 1, and you can't get them back for issue 2.
yeah, usually it's like by issue 6 or so. That's when you kind of see like a stabilization of like how many issues are going to be sold before standard attrition.
Just make every issue 1.
That's what they do sometimes.
That's what Marvel does now. They relaunch books
know.
that, you know, but Sean and I think we've all talked about this before in some form or fashion, that comic books might be better in doing story arcs where, like, Spider-Man, whatever you want to call it, it's a 6-issue miniseries, and then it starts to go with number 1 as a different title just because it would just keep that number 1 going to bring more people in. But they'll really make people who collect comics as a hobby really upset.
Well, yeah,
That would be a great way to digest comics.
I think it's the way to do that. Marvel is starting to move towards that. They're constantly announcing that they're canceling a book, but then they're replacing it with more or less the same book,
exact same thing.
continuing the character, but like it's under a slightly different title.
A good example is they just Wolverine came out, they canceled it, relaunched as Wolverine, and they're canceling Wolverine again to relaunch with another Wolverine book once this whole story arc of Death of Wolverine is done.
Right,
It's called Wolverine.
So it's like they're just the stories, so it's not that stunning moment of walking into a comic shop asking for a Wolverine and seeing that it's in the 600s and saying, no, forget that.
Well, yeah. Well, Hellboy's always done that, which is just like Hellboy: The Wild Hunt, issue 1 of 5. But then what's nice about that is I hate putting my books like that because then I have to put them in alphabetical order and then numerical order under that. But the volumes...
Nerd problem.
Yeah, I know.
But then the graphic,
chronological, man.
I feel the same problem Scott does.
but the graphic novels come out, Hellboy: Wild Hunt, Volume 1 or whatever it is. That will put them in order.
Even that presents some problems because we were talking about ease of access for comics. Even though you no longer have large numbers on the cover for certain storylines, you still have the problem of, like, there's 6 months in between the first issue and the last. That's half a year from when that story started. And very little happens in an issue sometimes, like 22 pages. And that's Marvel's kind of trying to change that too. You know, for whatever it's worth, where they have, you know, it comes out twice a month or 3 times a month, so that the story's not stretched out over the entire year.
And not every writer writes in arcs. You know that,
but
right?
they do. But Penelope, what were we gonna?
It's a really good point. Attention span. You know, I can be on the internet, like Scott was saying earlier, be distracted forever. I have a phone in my pocket I can play with. We have really short attention spans. You know, we only read headlines. We only look at short things. Do people not want to wait 6 months to get a story, or do they want to sit down and just watch it for an hour and a half?
Heck, waiting a month is a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I mean, maybe. I mean, part of that kind of like trying to put together with Walking Dead. You know, it has 13 episodes a season, so 13 episodes, like 4 months, right? So it's a weekly book. This comic arc would be 4 to 6 months. Now, granted, you get Walking Dead every week, where a comic might be every once a month or every 2 weeks, but people clamor to come back for Walking Dead, clamor to come back to, you know, Game of Thrones, these shows. So it just makes it like easier to digest. But I mean, it's also waiting not so a week, but a month, 3 weeks, 2 weeks. But it's kind of weird how that people want. Just watch, and then they come back. You know, they don't go, oh no, I'm not going to watch this since it's all for 8 months out of the year.
Right? They don't do that.
Well, people that will wait a month for comics, they generally don't read one comic book, so there's usually a reason to come back every week.
Yeah, typically, and you have like the regular customers that are in every Wednesday. But we're not talking about the typical customer. We're talking about why, you know, reasons people, the average person, is not a customer in a comic book shop.
But it's definitely, I think, attention span too, because like, for instance, when, you know, we go through our comics and, you know, there's people who haven't been here for months, and they call them up and go, oh, I totally forgot I have comics on hold or whatever else.
Yeah.
It's just not in people's minds. It's not a priority. And it shouldn't be just a hobby, but it's priorities, TV, the shows are priority, the movie, the toys, whatever, you know.
Right.
And again, because it's more in your face.
Yeah.
You know, you have a TV in your living room.
Right, and you know The Walking Dead is going to be on at 9 o'clock on Sunday, or 10 o'clock, whatever it's on now. I don't watch Walking Dead.
And it goes back to, you know, why can't Marvel do, hey, here's Amazing Spider-Man monthly commercials.
Right.
To keep it fresh in somebody's head. Oh, okay, Spider-Man does come out.
Especially during Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It seems like such a missed opportunity that it's not like, hey, read this comic on the shelf right now. Now, go.
And it's also trendy. Your friends are doing it, watching this.
Right.
So you want to watch it, so you can talk to them.
That's
and not everyone's reading
Absolutely.
comic books. And the less people
At the
that
same
do
time,
it,
no less.
Right.
You know that an hour from that start, Facebook's going to blow up with what just happened on that episode.
Spoil you.
Yeah.
We should start spoiling all of our comics after we read them. Then. Start this momentum.
Our 3 friends will get really upset.
More like 7, maybe.
But
yeah, a bunch of customers befriended me, so I'll ruin everything for everyone.
But that's a really good point. You know, the same thing applies to movies, which we mentioned before. It's a social aspect. There isn't that with comics.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to have it. Yeah. You can have it to a certain degree, but then there's no timing.
It's a solitary thing.
Yeah, it has to be.
And it also commands all of your attention. You can't do anything else while you're reading a comic book. While you're watching TV, you can be surfing the internet. Again, with the attention span, you can be doing 3 things at once. Messing on your phone, doing whatever while you're watching
You can with a comic. You just stop reading it.
But you have to, stop. It's not still in the background.
And then
like
look at
a TV.
something else. Right. It doesn't keep reading itself without you.
Exactly.
It should.
I actually listen to music sometimes when I read.
That's cool.
It's bizarre.
Did you try
People
to
yell
match
at
it
me
up?
for it.
Is it themed music?
No,
Why do
people
track
yell at you
music?
for that.
Yeah, who's
Like,
yelling?
who gives a crap?
No, like
Tell us who touched it.
You only read comics in the store. Do you put music on?
actually sometimes on my phone. Yeah,
It's me in the back when he comes to read it. I'm trying to talk.
And he slowly puts on his headphones on.
This is gonna be great with all of our in jokes.
Yeah.
So I think these are some pretty good reasons why people.
But there is no definitive answer.
What?
No.
We didn't come up with a real answer?
No,
there's
we
no answer right now?
This is not a think
solve
tank.
this.
Next
like
up
a
is
think
world
tank.
hunger.
Yes. Make more food.
Problem solved.
Done.
If
Cancer.
The 1 or 2 people that actually watch and listen to this, I'd like to know if we have a comment thing. I'd like to know what other people think.
We're gonna put this on YouTube, so in the comments,
Please
make your predictions for why comic books don't do as well as comic book movies.
Yeah, I guess we'll also share this on Facebook.
Keep
so
the
talk to us
conversation
there.
going.
You can come into the store and talk to us. It's like the internet but real life. You're never there. It's fine.
We're looking at you, whoever you are.
So all right, I think we had some pretty good ideas there. What about the fact that these movies are so popular to begin with? What is it about these?
People like just seeing explosions and people running and shooting laser beams out of their face.
It
little
can't
bit
be
of
that.
It's-
It can't be that.
It's a spectacle.
All right.
A spectacle partially, but there is when they realize that, oh crap, this is actually a good idea if we get good writing, a decent budget, and marketing wise, because who doesn't know who the X-Men are? Who doesn't know
I would say
who's
marketing
Captain
more than anything, because nobody
Yeah.
really cares. Not to say nobody. I would say a good majority doesn't care who wrote it or who directs it.
Hang on. He raises an excellent point. You could be Michael Bay and you could make the Transformers over and over again, but that's not what Marvel's doing. That's not what DC's doing.
No, they're quality movies.
They're trying to make a good movie. They're
Marvel
trying to tell a story, to get good actors,
Yeah.
to film it in a really pleasing and good way. I mean, the cinematography in some of these films is incredible. I thought X-Men was beautiful. There were some shots, but they don't have to do that. If it's just explosions, people will show up to watch Michael Bay film
Expendables.
robots punching each other. Expendables. You just keep making those movies over and over again, but they're not doing that. They're doing something else.
Here's what it goes into, and I think this goes into the core appeal of superheroes, is, yes, they're a larger-than-life experience, watching them, and all of their adventures and whatever. But especially a character like Superman, he's an escapist fantasy. It's a power. I forget the phrase for it. It's like a power fantasy, something like that. Where it's just you see these larger life invulnerable people, and it's a nice escape because good always beats evil. Granted, there's movies that play with the gray area in it, but at the end of the day, what did the X-Men do? Save the day. What did Captain America do? He saved the day.
Okay, that's fair. But
that can be said for any movie.
Yeah, and
There are very
I'm
few.
talking
that have,
very broad strokes.
Yeah, no,
Right,
I agree with Scott. I think superheroes are almost like the mythological characters of our age. I know that sounds really pretentious.
it's
but
been
Yeah.
said before.
Yeah.
That they are our myths.
yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
We can look at different aspects of ourselves and our society through the lens of a superhero, where we can explore somebody that can't be hurt, or if they can be hurt, it takes a lot to do that, and
they can overcome that great obstacle. Like Captain America: Winter Soldier, we've all seen that, right?
No, I didn't see it.
Yeah,
God damn
I
it.
know. Hey, somebody all went without me. So.
It's about a guy named Captain America.
Were you at home reading the comic instead of going to the movie with us?
Maybe.
Well, Captain America, the Winter Soldier movie deals with the gray area of the modern American mentality,
Right.
yeah.
and Captain America is unshakable in his ideal of America in it,
That's a
and he
really good point.
rails against that, And I think that's something maybe people would like to see.
But
Is that even though the world is not as black and white as it was, it's still lots of gray, that the right idea can still triumph. We don't have to necessarily lose our way. And I'm also probably looking at this way too much where a guy with like metal wings flies around. Someone else throws a shield at somebody else.
But you know what? I think while you bring up a good point, I do have to disagree a little bit because so often in these movies, they show characters, oftentimes the main characters, being morally compromised and leaving the story broken in some way. Man of Steel is a good example. Not that I cared for that movie, but they had Superman kill. At the end of that movie, he was driven to murder, which is something he never wanted to do. So they compromised that ideal. And maybe that speaks to where we are as a society right now, that you know,
I agree
there
with
is
that.
no unassailable good anymore, and these are how our heroes fall. But that maybe that's getting too deep into it. But
I barely even remember that movie. When he snapped his neck, I like woke up. I was like,
what?
oh, something happened.
It speaks to the quality of these movies that we can have these discussions about them.
Yeah.
right, which is why I don't buy the argument that people just like them because they blow things up.
Yeah.
They're
There's
more
got to be
compelling
more
than they
to
used
it.
to be. The stories have picked up, you know, and the quality of the movies have picked up.
More
I think
more
for the
importantly,
most
why
part-
superheroes? Why comic books? Why do we keep going to that well?
I mean, the stories are there. People didn't realize it before, but there are compelling stories in these comic books.
There are at least the ideas. There's a foundation. There's like a fundamental foundation where you can find the hero, the enemy, the anti-hero, whatever you're looking for a story, and pretty much any of the major Marvel, DC, Image. Like, you can find a story for what you're looking for in them.
And I kind of went back to a little bit. I still believe that a lot of people go for the big action sequences because
agree.
a lot of people.
I do.
No, I'm not saying that. And I appreciate the fact that there's a story to it. But a lot of people that we run into, when they go in and they talk about the movie, like a lot of them don't go, oh, that story was deep or whatever you want to say about it. They're like, oh, that action sequence with Blink going through the
Quicksilver
Cyclops.
was so
That's
amazing.
undeniable. That's an undeniable appeal.
So I do believe that
You
the
have to
story.
have both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think I personally still think, and whether I'm right, I think the action brings people to the story, not the stories. I don't think the story brings people to the action.
I agree.
I know that X-Men Origins Wolverine was just super because they punched people a lot, and there was no story, and it was awful. So
well,
It's gotta have both to be good.
that's what I'm saying though. Like,
Yeah.
So it have a lasting appeal.
exactly,
It's-
yeah.
It also
on-
has to be well written. Come on, that movie was not well written.
That's what I mean. Like
what
you
he's
can,
saying.
Yeah.
you can say, oh, people go there for the punching, but you won't walk out of that movie talking about it unless it's written well, unless there's a decent
Nah,
idea.
Or
behind
you're
it.
8 years old.
Yeah, well,
But also too, it's all
that's
also,
a different argument altogether.
Going back to Watchmen, I think it's word of mouth. Also, people will go, and some people who, thought they were going to get something else out of it, they just tell their friends, "Oh, this movie was bad."
It was a good story.
what about the Batman films? Christopher Nolan's Batman movies. There's not a lot of action. Like if you break it down, those movies aren't action packed. There are action sequences, but
The action in it is very spectacular, though. Like with flipping the truck and just the chase scenes in general.
in a grounded sort of way, though.
Yeah.
Too. They don't do the.
Well, that's part of just the appeal of Batman in general. Is you know,
Everything's much heavier, much more real.
They were compelling. And I
yeah,
think that,
those
you
are
know,
well done movies.
And that's what I kind of go back to. I think personally, I think more people go for the action, and the story is just brings them back for the next one.
Well,
the
that's
next
what
one.
made them great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's
That,
the,
the
There's
story
lots
made
of-
them great. There are some good movies that the story is weak, but the story in those made them great.
Go ahead,
well,
Bill.
here's the question. If, let's say, to use the Batman movies as an example, let's say it wasn't Batman. Let's say that Bruce Wayne character was just some totally other superhero that we'd never heard of, or not even a superhero, just some guy.
Yeah.
Would anyone have cared?
No,
Is
I
it
don't think
because
so.
it was Batman?
Right, and
Yes.
those.
And that goes back to the whole superheroes are
Yes.
They
awesome
make-
characters we already know about and
I
are
agree.
familiar with. And
They
Batman
make
is
understand.
they do make those
character.
movies. There are
Yeah.
movies like, and sometimes they're really successful, but they do make movies with either original characters or characters that aren't superheroes. And I mean, they're not as they don't perform as well as some of these superhero movies. So what is it about the superheroes?
They're bankable.
They're superheroes.
Because,
They're-
so
who
who
they
said
are.
who said that they were known? They were known characters. Was that you, Penelope?
I think Tim also
Tim.
said it too. Who
yeah,
doesn't
I
know
was
the
just saying
X-Men?
Oh yeah. Who
Yeah.
doesn't know the X-Men? I
So
remember
that's a
saying
good
that,
point. There's already a built-in fan base,
Yeah.
however small, and maybe they rely on that because they're these
Well, more
movies.
people know the name than just the fan base.
That's true.
Yeah, like even if you aren't reading right now, in the 80s or 90s, you probably read an X-Men book.
Right.
Like-
or you
Or
heard
your friend
about
did.
Yeah.
You knew
You've seen
of
a
the
toy,
X-Men.
You, knew
You watched the animated series. or
Before I
something.
ever read a comic book, I knew that Superman was Clark Kent and he lived in Metropolis.
Dude, it's a property.
Before I ever watched any of those movies, I knew
it's
that.
ingrained in our culture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's handed down. I mean, for maybe for Skylar or my niece, like she knew who Spider-Man was when she was 3.
Right. Oh yeah, it's almost like they're born knowing some of these characters.
Bob Morgan when he comes in with
Yeah.
his kid.
He was
He's
Iron Man,
Spider-Man, yeah.
Hulk.
Identify
So
with
it's
characters.
passed down. It's passed down whether you like a superhero or not. You know who these characters are.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
I
why
get
these
mine from
properties
the-
are worth money, and it's why they're
It's the same idea as like Mickey Mouse. Everybody knows Walt Disney. Everybody knows who Mickey Mouse is.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. These characters are part of our culture, like Sean said. Yeah.
All right, so we're done. All right.
Problem solved.
Another problem solved. Yeah.
What was we were gonna do cancer next, right?
Yeah. Cancer's on the docket.
let's
2
so
weeks from now.
you know we can talk about some of the movies we saw. We briefly mentioned Captain America as a couple of references, and we mentioned X-Men. Did anyone see Spider-Man?
No.
No.
None of us have seen
I keep meaning to
Because again, I
to
think
see it.
none of us like the first movie. So we're like the
Tim
story was
liked the first
Listen, well,
up this way.
well, all right.
Hold on.
Liked is a strong term,
Not
but I enjoyed it.
it doesn't matter. But nobody here really liked the first one, whether they liked it a little bit or a lot.
Yeah.
And again, it goes to good storytelling. The story was pretty bad. They dropped characters. They do whatever. I don't want to go back and see it because the other one was so poorly done.
I think the major part of it is it was cut to all high hell, and you could tell immediately
was
because
really-
it jumps
really
around
bad.
so bad.
Wasn't there like 5 screenwriters?
Yup.
Screenplay writers?
The
Hell,
tone
I
of
don't know
that
about
movie.
that, but like I know that they cut out like over an hour's worth of stuff and then refilmed a ton and like.
Well,
That's us. Obviously, we can agree that the first movie wasn't particularly
For
good,
us,
but a
yes.
lot of people really like that movie. I hear it. I hear it
I
all the
know.
time at the store.
Yeah.
People are like, "Oh, I really like the first one." I've even heard people say they really like the second one. So,
anybody can be a critic, but you can't tell somebody what is good and what's not. It's all up to somebody's personal opinion.
Yeah.
And what did they like about the story? Did they like the action? Just like because the character, everybody has their own opinion on it.
It's
And
art.
Like I enjoyed it, and when I told all of you guys, the first thing
Laugh.
that came out of their mouth was, "You liked that movie?"
well, Tim, you also
Like-
don't like Spider-Man in general.
That's true.
That's more
Yeah.
where I was incredulous with. I was like, oh, you liked like a Spider-Man story?
Yeah.
It's like Scott not liking X-Men. We were like, you didn't like that movie?
That shouldn't be a surprise. I kind of don't like the X-Men
why
comics.
Yeah.
did you
you
even
don't.
see that in the first place?
Jess was like, oh, want to go see X-Men? I was like, all right.
You're over there the whole time.
Oh, man, that was fun.
I
there's the
enjoyed.
I was
social
entertained.
aspect, you know.
So, all right,
The social aspect. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's exactly what it
I
was.
don't know about. Obviously, Scott did not care for Days of Future Past, but I was.
let's talk about. Hang on, let's talk about what we liked about
Okay.
that movie.
Yes.
Why did that
right.
movie work for us? And then we can get to the parts that we didn't.
I'll
like.
start with what I liked about that movie.
It was good.
You're not saying anything.
It was not. no.
No, just joking.
I like most of the cast that they have in the X-Men movies. You can tell that Hugh Jackman loves being Wolverine,
Yeah.
because who wouldn't love
He
being
is Wolverine at this
Yeah,
point.
you know what I mean? Like, I love James McAvoy's Xavier. I love old Xavier and Magneto. The effects in it were good. It was 2 hours long. Okay, that's the end of my list. That's all I can.
How is the runtime one of your positives? We'll come back to this.
That actually would be one of my
Negatives,
negatives.
I would have thought.
But
Oh man, what did I like about it? Like Scott said, the cast was good. I love Patrick Stewart. I love Fassbender. I love McAvoy. I love all these guys. You can tell they have a chemistry. You know,
Yeah,
Ian
yes.
McKellen and Patrick Stewart clearly have a chemistry outside of their business dealings or whatever you want
They
to
have
call
a
it.
bromance.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
it's
I
epic.
want to be a part of that.
What else did I love? The story. You know, as someone who I read X-Men comics in the '90s for like a week. You know, being a girl.
So you read one comic.
Seriously, being a girl at that period of time, you didn't read comic books.
No.
You know, so for very briefly, so I don't know too much about it, but the story was easy to jump into. I didn't have to care too much about previous movies necessarily.
Yeah, I was actually surprised at how easy the plot was to understand. I expected it to be a complete mess, where like every once in a while a character would have to stop and explain everything to another character to get the audience caught up, and they didn't really have to resort to
Only in the
that.
very beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I absolutely adored Quicksilver.
Yes.
Everybody adored Quicksilver.
What a shock, right?
Yeah, what a shock.
Everybody expected him to be the BK Kids Meal
Yeah,
product
exactly.
placement.
Dude, that Carl's Jr. commercial.
Yeah, dude, it's so
Oh.
freaky.
Yeah, it was funny.
I hate it.
But that's not in the movie. When he shows
No,
up in the
no,
movie,
yeah.
he's a blast. He's
Yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah.
It's a great action scene.
They don't take him because he would solve that movie's problem so fast. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I mean, just the movie in general. I enjoyed it a lot. It was well written, I think.
Yeah, I think there
it
was
was well
some.
conceived.
We're going to talk about what we liked, and then we're going to come back to what we liked. So,
That was
so
Scott
keep the
going,
comments.
It was, the story was engaging. It was interesting. I liked, the character development, the interpersonal conflicts that were happening, and overall, I liked it. It was good.
It could have been a train wreck.
Yeah.
Everything was there for it to be a train wreck.
Pre-release, it looked like a train wreck.
I was afraid it was going to be a Wolverine movie train wreck because I was like, oh, Wolverine's going back. This is going to turn into just a Wolverine vehicle, and we all know what that happened with the last two Wolverine vehicles. And it wasn't. It was a fun movie.
It was fun.
That made sense with itself. It didn't go crazy.
Yeah, in its own thing.
I think that Bryan Singer did it, right?
Yeah, it was Bryan Singer.
That Bryan Singer did kind of a J.J. Abrams with the retconning things in the universe and did a great job of excising the cancer.
Yeah.
That was X3.
Yeah.
I was just really happy with it. Never read X-Men comics.
It's hard to tell the difference between that and Wolverine sometimes.
Loved the X-Men cartoon of the 90s.
Yeah.
And it harkened back to me for that. And they didn't, I love the scenes, spoilers, I love the scenes where the X-Men are dying. People were about, I don't even know who that X-Man was who was getting killed. I don't care.
Yeah.
Just the fact when they were fighting the Sentinels, I love the death scenes of Colossus being ripped in half. It was so awesome.
It
I was
showed the hopelessness.
Yeah, I was surprised at how shockingly brutal it was.
It was.
Right
And
off the bat.
I liked it that they took the chance and did that.
It could be-
said, screw it, I'm going to kill all these guys. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
It was fun. It was just a fun movie.
His characters getting decapitated was so fun.
And I also like Game of Thrones.
Not anymore, you don't.
But I like,
He does, I
to add on to that a little bit, you say it as a joke, but I think it added a sense of urgency and threat to see the characters hurt, even if it didn't really matter because of time travel. And
But you didn't know it didn't matter in the beginning.
Right off the bat, you're like, whoa, what just happened?
Colossus is getting his head stomped in.
Right, this is for serious.
That was Iceman.
Whatever.
These guys
It was
are a
the same.
threat. I thought that was really cool, and that did add to the enjoyment of the movie.
It was fun, man. It was a fun movie.
Greg,
It's
what
what a
did you-
comic book movie should be.
I agree, Greg. What do you think?
Yeah, ditto. I mean, I don't want to retread much, but I mean, I thought it was the most comic book movie there was. It stuck to its own rules. It was very bombastic in that sense. The other Marvel movies, maybe except for Avengers, it was very kind of grounded in reality. This was just crazy over the top comic book action and crazy logic, but it made sense in its own universe. Made sense of what I was doing. Even though I know a lot of people thought it was a Wolverine heavy movie, I thought
What? Yeah.
They all
It could have been much more.
No, it could have been, but my point of it is that his character worked for what it was, because Wolverine in this quick back in the comic, Kitty Pryde goes back. This Kitty Pryde nobody really cares about in the comic book movie universe. Wolverine, people know that's the character, like you said. Hugh Jackman exudes Wolverine.
Yes.
So that's why he became the character to go back, because people liked him. And
Seats.
in seats.
It's on screen.
And also too, I know some people had said, I thought the characters worked well together. I thought it was cool. They threw back to some talking about Azazel and Pixie, and they're dead now. And I really thought it really tied in it tied the two movies together, First Class and Days of Futures Past. And I thought that it didn't rely on people having to see the first movie, but if you did, it made it better. And I was talking before, I thought it'd be a train wreck, because I thought Matthew Vaughn was the writer and director again, and I was mistaken by a long shot, because it was Bryan Singer. I'm like, oh my god, I got really nervous. Bryan Singer's going to ruin this, because his most recent movies haven't been all that great. But he did. He redeemed this. He redeemed this stuff, made it a quality movie that was fun, and I would see a third time if I had the money for it.
Obviously an X-Men fan.
Yeah.
That's something we should mention. The fact that you guys saw it twice.
Yeah.
The three of you.
Willingly and lovingly.
Yeah.
Twice.
because the first time I saw it, I loved it, and then somebody who's, I won't mention any names, but somebody whose opinion I really respect hated it. So I was like, I need to go back and see this and see if I really did love it. And I did. I liked it more the second time.
You will in a minute. Go ahead, Tim.
We'll give you your chance to stick your foot in your mouth.
And then we fight.
I did not, forewarning, I did not like it as much as some of the people in this room.
We're not talking about that.
I did.
He's gonna.
Yeah, man.
He's getting there. He's getting there.
Let me finish my sentence. I did, however, enjoy the movie thoroughly. I don't like the argument of it could have been much worse, but unfortunately it could have been much worse.
No,
It's not an argument.
No, I mean, like,
it was
really
been a
good.
train wreck and wasn't.
I totally understand and respect that, and I normally, like, I don't like saying that, but it's true. I really do, as much as I hate Hugh Jackman's face, and I'm sorry, Hugh Jackman, I'm sure you're a nice dude.
That's not. We need to hear what you like.
But
I like how you're rapping what you liked and what you didn't.
But I
Yeah, Tim, I
really,
didn't even do that.
I really liked him playing Wolverine. He does an incredible job.
Despite his face.
I just want to respond real quick to saying, I want to try to explain what I mean by it wasn't a train wreck. It doesn't, I was going into this movie not expecting it, I was expecting it to be as good as First Class.
Okay.
And it was. By saying it wasn't a train wreck, well, by all means, I didn't have any preconceived notions about it. So,
Okay.
So by saying us saying it wasn't a train wreck isn't a quality for it being good. It's just saying it was what it was.
I understand that. When I hear that phrase, I'm just like, that's like saying, well, it wasn't total crap.
No,
You know,
that's
like,
not that
like,
bad.
like,
I understand that.
It's impressive
Yeah.
that they were able to pull off what they pulled off.
Yeah, 'cause there's
despite
a
the
lot
fact that
going
on
on.
paper that looks like nonsense.
Whenever you bring in time travel, it's like
or that many
What?
characters for
Yeah.
That was the thing with me.
yeah.
Like, how are they going to juggle?
Do you remember when they were announcing the cast and they're like, "Oh, this guy's going to be what's his Bishop, and this guy's going to be Blink,"
Yeah.
and we're like, "Whoa,
Who cares?
Yeah, that's what I
However, the new Magneto and the new
Fassbender
Professor
and
X,
McAvoy.
they do an incredible job, and you can tell. Like you talked about, like a dynamic between the two characters. You can tell they have it too.
They're both great actors too.
They do an incredible job, like screaming at each other. In one particular scene.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the only thing good about Prometheus.
All right, but we won't even get into
This is a
that.
different conversation.
You know the rules.
That's
Star
going to be a
Trek, Star
4-hour
Trek.
long conversation.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry, Justin.
I liked it that they at least kind of tried to make, like they tried to fill in as much X-Men like name branding as they could. Like they threw a ton of names at us just to be like, hey, listen, we know you like this character. Here's this character.
But
They're a
they,
team.
but
They didn't throw
they
names
didn't
anywhere.
do that though.
Yeah.
They wrapped it in the story of the movies. They didn't just throw a random character out at you.
I don't think Tim was paying attention during this movie.
I was paying attention during this movie.
We'll
All right,
We'll get back
actually,
to
let's talk. Let's finish up talking about what we like, we
Yeah.
don't like, and then we can discuss against each other.
Yeah.
It's
Because
just have me screaming at everyone and everyone screaming back.
no, we'll talk rationally.
Reason will prevail.
No, I have some things to say about. I can't believe and nobody else mentioned this. First off, Peter Dinklage did an
was
incredible
awesome.
job.
His voice and that mustache.
Incredible, strong.
His mustache. Oh my god.
Best actor in the movie. Was it real?
It was real.
it was real,
It was real.
That's awesome.
and it was glorious.
And it was
Glorious.
incredible.
But his voice is awesome too.
He did an incredible job
Yeah.
just playing the character.
Correct.
Obviously.
How can we
but-
forget about him?
Yeah. But holy crap, that mustache. All right, moving on.
Yeah, there's not much to say that hasn't already been said, but I felt like after going into it, kind of expecting it to not work, hearing everybody say that it was great, I wasn't really sure if I was going to like it. I thought maybe that I'd watch it and go, yeah, you guys are kind of overselling it a little bit. But I really enjoyed it. Like, I was smiling through most of it. I thought the action was great. The action was easy to follow. And for once, all the X-Men were using their powers together as a team. Like, there was coordination with their powers. I thought that was so cool. Especially with Blink. They kept throwing, Blink had Colossus do the fastball special. And
That was awesome.
I thought they did a great job with that.
Tim will say something, but we can't yet.
No,
Sucker.
relax. Relax.
My tongue's gonna bleed.
We can see
Oh
how
my
tense
God.
me and Tim are on camera.
We're talking about what worked. We'll get to that. Don't worry.
I know, but what you're saying I don't think worked.
I know we need to rebut things.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're gonna talk about. What doesn't work, and then we butt each other.
Right, because otherwise it would just be a mess of us shouting
Just
at
start
each
screaming.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And no one ever sees that on a day-to-day basis.
So I like that. I love the use of the time period. I thought it was so incredibly 70s. The room that Wolverine woke up in could not have been more 70s. Yeah, even the alarm clock was the most 70s alarm clock they found. You know?
The safe house, the metal vault that they have underneath the White House, like
Oh yeah,
it's just lead. Like like
good stuff. Yeah.
That'll survive a nuclear bomb.
I did like that a lot. You know, Quicksilver, like Penelope mentioned, was fantastic. The use of music, especially during that scene, was really great.
Absolutely.
A lot of the times, period movies can get carried away. I think Watchmen's an example of that,
Watchmen's a major example.
where they're just throwing too many, like, hey, remember the song is from this time period.
I think it worked just as well.
Right. Yeah,
We've had
they did a
that.
good
No, I
job.
disagree with you. I think it was awesome. I think it worked just as well.
But okay, whatever. I'm just gonna hear what I want to hear with this one.
Yeah, you did.
With X-Men though, I was surprised that they managed to tell a time travel story that wasn't so convoluted that it didn't make any sense whatsoever. You know, there's one little bit that I'm a little fuzzy on towards the end with Mystique, but it didn't really have anything to do with time travel. The fact that they were, like you said, they were able to get rid of X3 by doing this, you know, they go back and reset everything. That was fantastic. I love any time in a movie where an actor is playing themselves being played by somebody else. So when Mystique is Peter Dinklage, so Peter Dinklage has to pretend that he is Mystique playing Trask. I love that. I don't know why, but whenever they do that in a movie, that gets me, especially when they pull it off.
the tear wipe and like nothing. I'm fine.
Right. You know, the fact that he's Peter Dinklage is playing a character playing another character.
Yeah.
That was easily his best scene as an
I'm the
actor.
dude playing the dude playing the other dude.
Exactly. What was another example of that recently? There was I'm completely blanking.
White chicks, right?
It was White Chicks. I love White Chicks. No.
She's talking about the Wayans brothers.
Yeah, they're the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Dude, they ran out that those horses did that movie.
Marlon,
Spoiler alert.
Keenan, Joey, and Tito are the Wayans four horsemen of the apocalypse.
Good God.
What are we talking
Yeah,
about?
what has even happened now?
You mentioned white chicks.
No, I mentioned white chicks.
Should that go on our list of things we're not allowed to mention already?
From henceforth, no one is ever to mention
White chicks is stricken.
I don't think it was good by any means.
Anyway, I thought of it. It was in Thor 2 when Chris Evans shows up as Loki is being Captain America.
That was a really good
That was
example.
awesome.
I love that.
It was excellent,
It's
yeah.
fantastic.
Highlight of that movie.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the only
best
two
part of that
examples of
movie
that
by a
ever
long
happening
shot.
I would
in the
agree with
history
that.
of movies.
Yeah.
But at any rate,
Well, they did that in the G.I. Joe, the second G.I. Joe movie.
Oh, yeah.
Too, and
Zartan being...
Yeah, Zartan doing his thing. That happens in movies all the
Do
time.
you know
I
Marlon
love it.
Wayans was in G.I. Joe 1?
I'm sorry.
Stop it.
I
Was
didn't mean
Tito
to bring it
involved
up.
also?
okay. So, yeah, you know, I could probably go on and on about what I liked about the movie, but I didn't really like.
But Scott wants to go on what he hated, so...
Yeah.
Well, Tim wants to go on also, so you know, it's two of you. It's all good.
I will say one thing. I want Michael Fassbender to be Magneto forever, and I want to see more of him being Magneto.
He really does an
I'd
incredible
like to
job.
reiterate how much I love Michael Fassbender.
Yeah.
I know this was the plan before they First Class, but there needs to be a Magneto vehicle.
No, that got
absorbed
scrapped.
into First
No,
Class.
I know.
Yeah.
That's what First Class turned into.
Yeah.
That's what or turned into First Class. But they need to go back and do that.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Just Magneto.
Because I didn't love First Class that much.
I did.
I liked it a lot.
I liked it a lot. Yeah.
I liked the story and most of the actors, but the kids annoyed me. Thank God they are all dead in this one. That's why I liked it
So
more.
glad they
All
killed
dead.
those kids.
3 of them died.
I agree with Justin.
Oh, dude.
I liked it, but not
Banshee's
good.
dead, thank God. Pixie, Angel, whatever the hell she was, is dead, thank God.
And Azazel.
Zazel is
Emma Frost is dead too.
Yeah, Emma
Oh,
Frost
this is
dead.
Emma Frost.
Well, that was the
Wait,
future past
what?
that didn't happen.
Yeah,
None of
they
those
mentioned
people are
it.
dead.
You know those people.
No, those people are still dead.
Yeah,
What?
They died before the events changed. The event
Yeah.
that changed everything was in 73, was
When,
it?
yeah,
Yeah.
when Mystique kills Trask.
Wait.
Up until then, that was the same.
Yeah.
Emma's-
They're already dead.
Yeah.
So they're dead
Emma's
in that
dead.
timeline.
So they're already dead.
Right,
That
they're
sucks.
dead in the new future. That's
Right.
How?
Wait,
Yeah,
When?
died.
When did that happen?
When
the
he's when
future train
Mystique's
went
going.
off the ravine.
Yeah, I don't think you were paying attention. That's what Mystique finds out, which makes her go to kill Trask.
I did not get to read all those names, and I screwed up
Neither
that.
did I,
but-
but they,
She
she
said
says
them
it out
earlier in
loud
the
a couple
movie.
times.
Yeah.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
She says them later.
And there's pictures. There's names and pictures.
I didn't hear her
And
say them
she
either.
says
She
it.
said-
I don't think
said
you were really
names.
paying. Were you
Yeah.
getting a?
Were you making out in the back with?
So,
With-
like,
And then you cut it.
but
I know.
just
I
leave
know
it
what
at
I
that.
did.
I don't know who you saw
No,
this
I
with.
missed out the first time. You should see the movie 2 or 3 more times.
But you missed the first time when they said who was dead.
No, when
So
they're
once I
actually
knew
looking
what
through the
was dead.
paperwork,
Oh, yeah.
I missed the actual words of the names. I
I
did
got-
see some pictures.
I
and
got
then
some,
she
but, like,
mentions it.
I don't remember
See it
her
again?
saying the names though.
Yeah, she does.
Just one. I know she says Azazel.
Oh yeah, she says Azazel, but that's
She says
that's
Angel.
it.
She says Emma
She
Frost.
She
also.
says Emma.
I don't-
She
Just
says
Emma
she
Frost.
says Angel. She says them all at some
When
point.
did she do? Is that when she's talking to Magneto?
I think that's when she's talking to Havoc at that POW or that army
Vietnam.
place. Yeah, Vietnam.
No, I think Magneto actually says Emma on the plane.
Yeah, some
Yeah,
they,
yes,
they
that's
say
right.
yeah they say it through. They say who died
Because you
Oh
don't-
yeah, he's yelling the names
Yeah.
at
That's
Professor
it.
X.
Because
because
you abandoned us,
which was
Yeah.
such a great scene.
Awesome.
Oh, I think somebody asked me a question at that point, like who is that? All right, that makes more sense. But
You-
that's
But
who I-
Magneto.
You need to rewatch this movie.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
Or like what-
because
Two
there's
or
nothing
3 more
like
times.
shown that Emma Frost. He just yells it.
Yeah.
no, I think she's
No,
one of the pictures.
She's one of the
Yeah.
pictures.
she's one of the
yeah.
pictures?
She's one of
Okay.
the pictures.
Okay.
I don't remember her being a picture.
You don't
She was a
remember
picture, yeah.
But after the train goes off the ravine, everything's changed in the forward
I-
of the timeline here.
I was a little bit confused by the timeline, but you're absolutely
I get it.
It becomes Eastwood.
Clara Barton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Clara.
That's Back to the Future 3.
Which you hate. That is a story for another
I
time.
mean, that's where time travel doesn't work. Like you kind of have to get over it in Back
The
to
picture
the Future.
fades.
Yeah,
Yeah,
his,
we
hand,
cannot
his hand
stop.
fades out just a
Honestly-
little
Stop,
bit.
stop.
You know?
We cannot have this discussion right
Honestly, just time travel in general in movies is usually, and just time travel in stories in general. The time travel part of it is just a tool to tell a larger
It's the
story.
paradox.
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's always
You have to-
Which is why it
Accept
works in
it.
this movie.
And I thought it
is
did
why-
work. So
Works in this
go
movie.
ahead. All right, you know what? We went around the
Yeah.
table. Scott, take it away.
I think that should be last.
Kitty Pryde sending Wolverine back in time is.
Why?
Cares.
Xavier could just do it, and I wouldn't be able to say anything.
Cares that pretty
Yeah, who
had that
cares?
power.
In a universe where a guy can shoot lasers out of his eyes and another dude
But he
has
doesn't shoot lasers out of his ass. He doesn't shoot mayonnaise out of his nose. He shoots lasers out of his eyes. She walks through stuff. She doesn't send people's minds through time.
Oh my god, can you hear yourself?
Yes,
right
I can
now?
hear myself.
You're too married to the comic.
Yeah.
I don't give. If I was married about to the comic, I'd be pissed. Kitty didn't go back in time. So it doesn't happen.
Listen, this is how I look at it.
If I was married to the comics, I could not watch any of these. X-Men
Listen,
movies.
and as a comic fan, the how she had this powers is kind of or why she has powers is ridiculous, but doesn't matter in the context
Alright.
of this movie.
Hang on. Haven't they established before that certain X-Men have secondary mutations after the fact?
They established none of this in the movies.
Not in the movies.
I'm not asking that.
You have to inject is the only one
Yeah,
which was
they're-
Beast
they're-
in the movies.
Yeah,
That's
they don't-
never happened
they
with
don't get
another
them- they
character
don't
where
get them
they've had
naturally.
like
Beast.
In the comics, yes.
that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. That's what they're drawing from.
The movies
So a
need to
character-
stand on their own.
Hold on.
Jean Grey was more powerful than in the movies. Was more powerful than they led on to her to believe. Until she developed those powers when she died, she
Right.
became the Phoenix. Her powers were more.
Right. She was
Maybe
able to do
as
more.
Kitty Pryde is getting older. This is just who cares really? But maybe
Yeah.
as-
No. Here.
Maybe as she's getting older, she developed this power.
Lem-
She has a power over space.
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe it's space time.
Or how about connections in the brain? Maybe it's just a matter of creating a connection to your past memories that
Oh
somehow.
yeah, because this is Lucy, where more of your brain controls
who
time.
cares?
Yeah, like
No.
but yeah,
No,
precisely.
please let me explain why
Yeah.
I care.
Okay.
All right. Not only is the Kitty Pryde part of it, what it is, they send Wolverine in time. They specifically say they send him because his mind can heal from that. Why doesn't he remember everything before? Why does he have to come to Xavier? I don't know what's going on. I'm some sort of animal. No. He f***ing gets amnesia throughout the movie.
I'm so glad that I'm going to have to edit all of these curse words. This got way out of control. So,
Adamantium bullet.
At the end of it,
God damn it.
Backwards time.
I know
bullet.
what Sean's going to
no,
say.
at the end of it, Penelope made this amazing observation that explains why he doesn't remember this stuff because all this time travel
No, he
nonsense.
doesn't remember it because that wouldn't affect. On that timeline, he never went back in time. Once he goes back in time, it's just basically Back to the Future 2, where it's a splinter timeline. So basically, because he remembers all of those movies, it does not work that way for him.
Time is a flat circle.
I haven't seen it.
Maybe
haven't
that's
seen it.
the future of part of that timeline. Maybe he's already experienced that. That already happened. Time is just happening, man.
So you're upset because they said his mind can heal from the damage that Kitty Pryde would cause using her power.
Yeah.
But because he can't remember something, therefore his mind can't heal. I don't think that means that he had brain damage. There can be psychological trauma that changes the way you remember things. That has nothing to do with your physical brain. His healing factor is just the physical nature of it. They implied that what she's doing in your head could cause damage.
Not just your brain, but your entire body. I was under the impression, after seeing the movie twice, that it had something to do physically, not just your brain not being able to handle it.
Sever
but your whole
connections or whatever.
body. Yeah.
That's why Bishop is going back in time all the time.
Well, technically, he only goes back in time once.
They said they do it multiple times.
Yes, but he only goes back in time once.
They say they've done it multiple times.
Yes,
He doesn't go
but
very far back.
he
It
only
only
goes
goes-
back in time once.
Because it never happened.
It never
Yeah,
happened,
it
so he
never-
only goes back in time
Plus,
once.
it's a very short period of time. It's only a day or...
Yeah,
a
she said
month
it,
is the
yes.
and she said any further than that can cause damage.
She
but they
set the
never-
rules.
Right.
But
They
I don't know why we're arguing this minutia.
yeah, that's what it
No,
doesn't
no.
matter.
It's because everyone attacks me because I think that the core conceit of how they set up this movie was dumb. There's two really easy fixes for this. Xavier with his brain powers could have done it. Rachel Summers did it in the comics. It was just like, oh, I'm psychic, so I can just do this.
Why is that?
No,
Scott, do you like Indiana Jones?
yes.
You know, if they didn't go up there and find the right spot and dig up the Ark, then the entire movie would
I
never
understand
Right.
this.
Indy makes the bad things happen in
happen.
the movie.
Yeah, and he doesn't win in the
I
end.
don't think that's a fair comparison.
But it's
but
minutia.
But here's the other thing. I wouldn't have a problem with it if they did it that way. And I wouldn't, because Xavier's just sitting there in his fucking little hover chair, like, oh boy, I hope the Sentinels don't smash through.
But
no, let me finish.
I will, but
Yeah, if you will, let me finish.
they set
All
the
right.
rules
All right,
already.
let Scott finish.
All right. Wolverine, if they didn't say that my mind thing, he'd be like, I'm the only one from that time period who wasn't fucking a drug addict and wasn't in like a mile below the Pentagon. And they were just like, I'm the only one at that time who can do this. Everyone
Can we
else,
do this without the F bomb?
Who hasn't ever
Is that
made-
possible at all?
No.
You're
Okay,
saying,
so
you're saying
fair-
no one
fair
has
enough.
ever made that.
Yes, that's all you have to say.
Right.
And then that's a real easy fix. I can't have that complaint.
But why is there going to be a fix? They set these
Because
rules.
this-
Hold on. Let me finish.
Oh my God, it's like we're on Fox.
I know.
So let me finish,
wait,
man.
so-
Let me finish. No, hold on. No, hold on. No, hold on.
You're
No,
supposed
hold on.
to
No, hold on. No, hold on. No, hold on.
As a commentary, you shut it.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, listen.
Hitler communist.
I forgot what I was saying. Though. They set
Socialism.
they set the rules for this. Whether they're dumb or not, they set the rules of the movie. You
Yeah.
cannot be upset about the rules they set for the movie because that's the rules of the movie they
You
set.
either buy into it
or
or
you don't. You didn't buy into it. It's
didn't buy
fine,
into
but
it.
you can't say it breaks down because
And
they break it down.
The other thing you can't do is say that it doesn't work and then it has to stand on its own, because people who have no idea what the comics are
No.
had no problem with what happened in it, because they were like, well, okay, because they explain what's going on in the movie. So it's not like they didn't leave out any core what's the word I'm looking for? They didn't leave out any important information that the viewer of the movie
Any
would
huge
have needed.
plot hole.
Yeah, like it was all there on the screen, and if you were paying attention, it made sense, and if you weren't paying attention, maybe it didn't make sense, but who cares anyway?
I have a quick question while we're addressing this, because maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
How does Professor X talk to himself?
I thought that was just like a memory thing. I don't know.
Like what?
He's psychic.
What happened there? What?
Well, he can project his. He can project his mind, right?
Yeah,
he
he's
comes into Wolverine through Kitty Pryde and projects his mind out of Wolverine.
No, but she's not
no,
sending.
no.
No, she's not sending back his mind. She's sending back his
No, Tim,
consciousness,
here's
right?
how it's worked. Wolverine in the 70s talked to James McAvoy Xavier. James McAvoy Xavier is like, all right, I'll go into your head. Wolverine's like, yeah, go to the future because that's how that works. I can buy that because psychic, whatever. And then while he's there, Patrick Stewart Xavier's like, oh, something's going on, and sends him going over there. And they had like a weird
Yeah.
They talk to him in Wolverine's mind.
Yeah,
If we
it
start
was-
having
But I
issues
thought
with
we
this,
didn't-
We can't watch comic book.
No, that's perfectly fine. I was just curious because I thought they couldn't send back his mind. I thought they sent back his consciousness.
How are you drawing that
yeah,
distinction?
come on.
Yeah,
I don't
that's the
remember what
same
it said.
thing.
I thought
No,
it
no,
was-
no,
I
I'm
thought
a-
that was what was said.
I'm asking you personally, how are you drawing that distinction? What is the difference between the mind and the consciousness?
Because you guys just
Are
said
you
that they
saying
go into his
brain?
mind.
Are you mean? Okay, right. That's what I'm trying to figure out. What? How do you define?
Conscious mind.
How do you define
Okay,
the mind?
so they go into his consciousness.
Mind is not a physical space. Your brain is a physical space. Your mind is something else. Are you?
your
you mean
consciousness. Sure, I mean brain.
brain? Okay.
Because
No, they
mind
didn't
and
send
brain
his
and
material
consciousness.
brain into-
Sure.
No, they never said.
That
They
would've been
never
a way
said.
different movie.
Because
They would have
when,
needed like some the fly tubes for that, like they weren't sending matter.
Are you high right now?
that's the reason why when Wolverine sees Trask and his old Wolverine's mind comes back in because he gets so upset for whatever reason, his mind snaps back to the future. When the Wolverine at that time goes
Sent
into
back to the
Yeah.
future.
it did.
Oh God, he said it.
But not Back to the Future.
So your problems seem pretty symmetrical. Like
here, that's the core concept of the movie. To me, was distracting.
Okay.
I don't like the X-Men movies in general. I don't like the aesthetic decisions they've made for it. I think the team setup has been weird. The continuity's been bizarre.
it's such a weird thing to say for someone who doesn't like the comics or the characters. What does it matter what the configuration?
Can I?
is?
I liked the comics. Also, that wasn't a complaint. That was just a legitimate question. I had no freaking idea how that worked. As somebody who enjoyed the comics, well, has enjoyed the comics, not now, but that we'll get on that some other time. Who has enjoyed the X-Men? I felt like the team didn't. Like I was biting my tongue the whole time you were talking because you were like, they worked together so well. And the only thing they did was somebody threw Colossus through a portal once. And that was
I felt like they
pretty
were
much
fighting as a
it.
team.
They were fighting as a
It felt like a Danger Room scene.
Yeah, in the
No,
beginning,
no,
Kitty Pryde grabs Bishop's hand and they run through the thing
Yeah, they run away together.
Yeah.
while
the rest
Iceman is
protect them.
distracting them. They're working together. Like they were.
No, Iceman runs around the dude once and then gets murdered. Colossus runs up to the dude and then gets murdered.
Yeah,
They're
stabbed
to
through
get
portals.
murdered.
They're sacrificing
they know,
themselves for time.
Right,
Yeah, they're
so
just trying to stall them.
they fought together as a team.
No, they didn't though. Which
But
is
they
the problem.
totally did.
No, they were all separate. They all died separately. They were not fighting as a team.
Did anyone
you wanna
So
all
do you want them to be
together,
like holding hands and like they get crunched together? Is that
No,
how
I
you're
want them
like-
to use their damn powers together.
You were
She
not
can
watching.
put-
Listen, you were not
She
watching
can
the
make
same movie
listen.
we were watching.
She can make portals, right?
Yes.
Okay, make a portal over there.
She did.
Make a portal right here.
She did.
Have him freeze everyone and be done with it.
Tim,
That's exactly what
They
happened.
did
in
that.
this movie.
They did that
happened.
twice. The beginning and the
Thundercats jumped
end.
through her portal
Yeah.
into the back of one of them.
Thunderbird
She
and her were going all
gets
over the place.
stabbed because she tries to send one through a portal and cut it off, and it still manages to get her.
No.
That's-
She gets stabbed because she's trying to deal with three at once. But that's besides.
But that's using it because she's using the different times with the different teammates to
That's the
do what they're
second fight.
doing.
The first fight is just one. Step.
Yeah.
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 You
But-
didn't.
But the
you were
first
not
dude,
watching
the
this
first no, listen, the first fight they
He's
all
definitely doing a
die
good job.
separately.
But that
The first fight,
whoa.
they
Whoa.
all die separately.
But dying separate does not mean they didn't work as a team.
Yeah.
That's totally different.
That's such a weird.
Okay, so they all fought one at a time to create more
No,
time.
Yes.
fighting one at a time would have been if they all stood in a circle like an old 80s.
I feel like that's what happened.
Calm down. Calm down.
F.
Because if we could bring up a video clip of it right now, you see them fighting in the background. They're
Bruce Lee
clashing,
Yeah.
and like everyone's doing something. They don't just stop and wait for someone to get killed and then jump in. That's not the
No,
what's
they
happening in
don't
the
because
movie.
it happens so fast. They just get murdered and murdered and murdered and murdered.
I agree
No,
with
that is true, but listen also. They are fighting a group of things. If they're fighting one,
Right.
they would be working together more as a team as you would like them to.
Okay.
But they're not. They're fighting three.
So
three or four.
They all had to
maybe-
kind of
it was
square
two
off.
of them.
Maybe as a team they should have focused on one at a time,
But they
so that
couldn't.
they
get
could
stabbed
switch powers.
While the other ones are coming up behind them and just burning them from the back of the
I'm
head.
They-
sorry, but
wait,
your
wait,
guys'
hold on a second.
problems with this movie
No,
are ludicrous.
This is
Yeah,
the same
they're-
amount.
No, and listen, Tim. I see what you're saying, but if they did that, they would have gotten to Kitty Pryde and Bishop and killed them before she had time to send Bishop back his mind back.
That is a valid argument. I will agree with that one.
And
Those
that's
are
the reason why.
absurd.
And that's
but that
like,
one makes sense.
And like, I don't want to devalue anybody's opinions here, even though you're both wrong. I said even though you're both wrong, because we don't have discussion. Discussions are about. We don't want to,
No, that's a valid point, and I agree with it.
But there you go. That makes that scene work, because they couldn't just fight as a group against one, because then Kitty Pryde and Bishop would have been destroyed, and then it would have been the end of that movie.
Right, and that's why I think this was a good movie, because there were answers in the movie. Like, it didn't happen because they felt like it should happen. There wasn't just like, oh, whatever, let's just have this happen now. There was a plot-driven reason for almost every action in that movie. And that's why it was so tightly scripted. It kept coming back to, like, this is what's going on. That's why it was easy to follow. That's why it wasn't a mess. Because there have been plenty of movies where, like, I think Man of Steel is a perfect counterexample to a movie that, like, what the heck was going on? Like, it kept jumping around to characters that were doing something that had absolutely nothing to do with the plot. Like, why were we following Perry running through the city while it was getting destroyed? It had nothing to do with anything. And it was a distraction, but in this movie, like, there was always a reason we were following these characters.
I
get that, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to ask Sean, this is not, I don't want to get into Man of Steel, but was that scene with Perry, was Amy Adams in that scene also? Because they followed her quite a bit. Okay, because I don't remember it.
Well,
they followed her too.
Daily Bugle people, yeah.
No, and because I know they really followed Amy Adams, that's why she was everywhere somehow. But that's besides the point, I just didn't remember.
That's him, like, being like, okay, I'll die with you, random Daily Bugle person.
Man of Steel's done.
Daily
Planet.
This is done. Tim, go ahead.
I agree that they did it better than that, but I really do have a problem with them focusing on 3 characters.
4.
There were way more than 3 characters.
Dude,
sorry.
Wolverine, Magneto, and Professor X.
2 Magnetos, Beast.
Dude, the future one's got no...
Yeah, I don't even want to hear that. They had 3 lines.
It doesn't matter. They were the main crux of that end scenes, besides getting murdered of...
How Professor X did nothing but talk to all young Professor X. That was literally all that happened.
It's okay if you didn't like the movie, but, like, because you're picking out choices that work.
I like the movie.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Shut it, both of you.
I thought it was okay.
That's it. We're shutting this whole thing. You're picking out moments like.
I think Sean. I think we're out of time now. I think,
you wanted to see them done differently, but they still worked in the context of the movie.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it bad.
No.
Okay.
That's why I'm not.
Why are we yelling?
Because everybody keeps being like, no, that's a stupid opinion. That's wrong.
I don't want to yell.
Gregg's the only one that gave me like a legitimate like. No, listen, this is what this is.
Because usually I'm the one yelling.
Yeah.
But Scott, let me ask you this: kind of going back to that. So you didn't like the movie at all, no matter what.
No. Let me give my verdict on the movie. I thought it was okay. I thought it was kind of a dumb movie. Everyone loves it.
Hey, watch your language.
It's too late. It's too late now.
The praise you guys give this movie blows my mind. I don't think it's that good.
And I guess on the versa, we don't understand why you did.
I was entertained. I thought the characters were very flat.
What more do you want from a movie
Scott,
than to be entertained?
When we first read your opinion, I forget the sentence.
It was an exercise in stupidity.
Yeah.
It was.
That's what set us off.
So we were like, that was your first opinion of the movie. You were like, this isn't an okay movie. This is a decent movie. But it isn't. You said this movie was an exercise in idiocy.
God, I laughed so much when they're like, JFK's a mutant. I was like, God, it's so cliche.
Why is that funny?
But it's a comic book movie. Of course, it's cliche.
Thank
Comics
you.
are cliche.
No.
Yes.
If this was 20 years ago, I would agree with you. I think we've proven with other smarter comic book movies that it does not have to be dumb because it's a comic.
Why
book.
is that dumb?
It's
It
not.
also wasn't dumb.
Why is it
Well, let
dumb?
me ask you this: which movies would you consider smarter? I'm curious. Seriously, I'm just curious. I'm not trying to like.
Well, the Christopher Nolan movies, they at least ask some philosophical questions with. Like, we can discuss that.
But then also he fixes his back by punching it.
Oh yeah,
There's more
those
plot.
Alright,
back.
I'm talking mostly Dark Knight.
But you know what? The Dark Knight is a mess of a movie, and I love that movie. But the whole sequence with the Joker and the switcheroos make absolutely no sense if you try. What?
Winter Soldier does.
So are you talking about like
if you want to talk about a movie that makes sense and is enjoyable and deep on a philosophical level, Winter Soldier is.
I would argue Winter Soldier, if you start actually applying logic to it, kind of starts falling apart a little bit.
All comic book movies do.
Yeah, you have. There has to be a certain suspension. There has to be a certain level of disbelief in any movie.
You need to start watching documentaries.
But I feel like I feel like with X-Men, you're dismissing it too easily because there are some pretty heady concepts. It's not going to win an Oscar, and it didn't didn't make me cry, but there were some pretty serious concepts going on in this movie. It mirrors the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement. The whole idea of how we persecute people because they are different.
That is doing that since its inception.
Yeah,
that is a
that's
serious
standard
concept.
That's what it was.
But X-Men's always worn that on its sleeve.
So what? So they were true to the source material. So they said this is the core of what it means to make an X-Men story, and they made sure it was front and center. So, but you're saying, well, they've already done it, so whatever.
No.
It doesn't
That's
count.
not what I'm saying. I'm thinking as in broad strokes of this movie, I think it was kind of flat and didn't particularly engage me.
Okay.
I had fun with
that's
it
fair.
because I was able to make sarcastic comments throughout the movie.
And that's fair.
And I can get entertainment out of that. I won't defend The Room as a good movie, but I can have fun with that movie.
Yeah, but I feel like, it's just, I think we do have, like you said, it blows your mind. It blows my mind that you saw this movie and you're like, it is no better than The Room.
I did not say it was no better.
Because I can make fun.
I didn't think you said that, but you know.
I did not mean it in that terms. But all right, Turtles 2 is not a very good movie. I love it for its, but I love that for like its camp and different things in that.
So, for instance, so you enjoyed Winter Soldier.
I did enjoy Winter Soldier.
What other recent ones have you liked? Just I just want to like.
Well, of the 3 movies I've seen this year, Godzilla was a huge disappointment. I didn't.
I'm sorry, talking about more like Marvel / Sony, like the.
What came out last year? Thor. I didn't like. What was the other movie? Iron Man 3.
Iron Man 3.
I forgot
Avengers
that I
last
saw
year?
that. No,
Avengers.
I loved Avengers. See, Avengers. I think you say this works as a good comic book movie. I think Avengers works better as a fun comic book movie.
I agree. I personally think Avengers is a little bit better, but I still think they're on the same.
Story.
I think they're both on the same par.
Yeah, I would put them pretty equal.
I think Avengers told its story better, and I think that was benefited.
They told a
because
different
it was
story.
That's a little too
Avengers
high
is more
praise
realistic.
for me, and I think that's the difference.
I love Joss Whedon,
And
I love the Avengers, but there's virtually no story to that
Yeah,
movie.
it's just
and that's fine.
There's a
Man's on
MacGuffin,
space.
and then there's big aliens coming in because of the MacGuffin, and the end. There's really nothing else. And then it's the characters that make the movie. There's way more going on in Days of Future Past than that.
I'm sorry, Young Beasts and Wolverine and stuff isn't equivalent to. If we're just going by just characters pulling me through that movie.
I'm not talking about character. I'm talking about the story itself. It's a more compelling story.
Yeah. At any rate,
Well, it is because I think with the Avengers, all the compelling stuff was the lead up to Avengers, where Avengers was the
Getting them
action.
together.
Yeah.
Where this X-Men movie, it's just X-Men. There's
Yeah,
no
it's
there's no
standing on
single
its own.
movies that.
Well,
with
they've
that.
had 6 other X-Men movies if you're counting the Wolverine.
Yes, but I'm talking about like more like story-driven, personal. Like Iron Man is Iron Man, Thor's Thor. Where Avengers was the group, where X-Men never had there was never a Cyclops movie.
Yeah.
Wolverine's probably the only one. They were both awful.
Well, I would argue that almost all of the X-Men movies were just other Wolverine movies. It's Wolverine featuring the X-Men.
That's
he's
of course, yeah.
he's a common thread. I mean, that's a different argument.
Yeah,
to
that
make,
is.
but-
That's fine.
that's why they work differently. Why X-Men works better.
There was
and
elements I
works
liked from
different.
this movie. It's just my thing is just like when you said it was my favorite X-Men movie by far. I was like, by far?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Like
Yeah.
It's one of my
It's
favorite
okay,
movie,
I
like comic movies or action
I said
movies.
that too, but then I started thinking about great comic movies, and I was like, it's my top 5. It's in my top 7. It's in the top 10.
X-Men?
Yeah.
I thought X-Men's up there in my
There's
top.
so many good comic book movies now if you really sit back and
Well,
think about it.
if you want to, like, I'm talking about like broad, like Marvel, DC, not like watching the 300 or
well,
whatever.
I am.
Yeah.
I am putting all those in it.
Yeah, I'm talking about more like the superhero-y Marvel, DC type things.
We've gone on for about an hour and a half now. I think that's a pretty good point to start wrapping it up. But before we do, let's go around the table and name our top comic book movie.
Holy.
We have to pick one.
Just one.
Oh my goodness.
Well,
Do
because
it.
here we base it on how close it is to source material, how much it works on its own.
No. What do you
Oh, that's-
What do you care
just-
about?
just gut-
your
just
your
guts.
favorite your favorite
At
character
this
comic book
moment, 'cause it could change
adaptation.
tomorrow.
G.I. Joe, the first one, was my favorite by
Absolutely.
far. By far, G.I. Joe was my favorite.
I don't think we should
White
put
white
Transformers
chicks.
and G.I. Joe because they're toy movies, not comic.
Yeah, they're toys first before they were comics.
They're
He was just trying to get
Wow, this
just
is
as
rough,
good
man.
anyway.
Yeah, wow.
You can
way to-
only say
make us
one?
silent.
Just one.
Just one?
Pick your favorite so far of the crop. the last 10 years, 12 years, however long.
See,
it's
the
been.
problem with that is I would say Transformers animated movie is my favorite.
You got Star Wars.
for Transformers.
No,
yes.
of the recent crop of comic movies, starting with
crap.
with Spider-Man was or no, X-Men was in 2000.
So I would probably use
So starting from 2000
Turtles
with the
was
kickoff.
one of my favorites. Turtles too, but that's too late, too early. I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
I have mine.
all right, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah.
Iron Man.
The first
It
Iron
set,
Man? Oh,
it
that's a
set
great
the
movie.
precedent.
Iron Man's great. Yeah.
It set the character really well. It's a shame he did not have a good major story arc since, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Great casting.
Awesome.
The casting was incredible. The story was really well done. It's the first real let's sit down as Marvel Studios and be like, what can we do to make comic books better?
Yeah, let's make an Iron Man movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is just so lovable in that role. He's what carries the other two.
Yeah.
And that's the best part about these Marvel movies. Perfect casting, like Robert Downey Jr. for Iron Man, Patrick Stewart for Professor X. It was like they were born to play these roles.
Yeah, especially Professor X.
How about Josh Brolin as Thanos now?
Yeah, he's
Just
thinking about
announced
that. And
I can actually see the mouth for some reason. I don't know why.
and not that you really can tell, but Heath Ledger was amazing as Joker. I mean, that was
for
probably
for that fake of
It was
Joker.
an
Yeah,
inspired choice.
Yeah, it
yeah,
was.
that was.
Because I remember, am I the only one that when we first heard that, we were like,
Yeah, I was
The
like,
dude from Brokeback
F
Mountain?
this. I'm like, this is gonna be dumb. He's no Jack Nicholson,
Alright,
and then
so-
it's like.
Anyone
But-
else have a favorite?
Honestly,
Are we only talking the recent ones or just all time?
Go all time. Go ahead. Whatever.
What were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say again. I saying you can't use Transformers, but I love the animated movie. But recent ones, honestly, because I'm such a inspired me being just because I love the Avengers was the Avengers. Just because I wanted to see that on screen for probably since I was 13, and I finally saw a movie that really, like you said, kind of like a to the team concept.
Yeah.
Them fighting as these big global huge threats that only the Avengers can take care of. That was so amazing
it was
to
a
me.
day like no other.
They're like no other, exactly, and that's why I love that movie because it was a childhood dream. Plus, the action worked really well as they built this world to this crescendo of Avengers, and they could have just stopped the movies there, but of course they're not going to because
You can
whatever.
You can kind of tell that they are just starting out as a team and they're just getting used to working with each other.
And that's why I'm so excited when that dude Kevin Feige says like they had the movies plotted out to like 2023 or something like that. That's amazing.
That's great.
That's so cool.
Man, Avengers was so satisfying on so many levels. That was
Yeah.
the movie I thought was going to be a train wreck.
It could have been.
That could have very easy. There
But
was
no-
like so many characters to juggle.
It worked, I think.
I mean, unless
so.
you're a
Really,
Hawkeye
it's just-
fan.
it was-
Yeah.
Listen, it was a great action movie. And it was just set up the action piece, do the action piece. Set up the action piece, do the action piece. Really, it was,
But no, it was a spectacle movie. And
Yeah.
And you know that's why I wanted
it
it
was.
out of that. And that's
And
why
in
it's my
between, they
favorite.
had characters bouncing off of each other,
Yeah.
which was really enjoyable to watch. Because Joss Whedon, that's what he does.
But like,
Yes.
and like those so well acting, those characters are so well realized. You know,
Yeah.
like that is like I don't see Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. I see Tony Stark.
Yeah.
I don't see the Human Torch as Captain America. I see Captain.
Yeah.
oh god.
I think I'd have to say Avengers.
Avengers is tough.
I watched it again not that long ago and was really surprised at how, like, even having seen it multiple times before that, I was like, yeah, this is still really enjoyable.
Yeah,
really fun to
it's
sit through.
still you're still on that roller coaster ride with it.
Yeah,
I did watch it recently too.
I'm gonna have to say that that's my top.
Yeah, it's in good company though. With Batman Begins and Dark Knight, and
Yeah.
if we're talking only recent ones, I'd have to go Avengers. If we're talking all time, I have to go the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie
That was really
because that's what I wanted to see.
That was
And it is technically based off the comic.
That's the only one that pulls anything from the comic.
Yeah. And it's really well done.
Yeah, it's as well done as that concept's gonna get.
Yep. Giant turtles. Yeah. That's.
Can I say 4?
Just pick one.
He stretched it to 2. I'm stretching it to 2. I have to say, honestly, from the recent crop, I really liked Days of Future Past. I think that might be my favorite.
Nice.
Wow.
Okay.
It was tough. When I saw Captain America and Winter Soldier, I really liked that, but I think Days of Future Past might have surpassed it.
I'm gonna see it again before I say that.
But,
After I saw Winter Soldier, I didn't
Winter
know
Soldier's
which I
up there
liked
for
better,
me.
Captain
But
America.
all
is.
time, I think I might have to go old school and say The Crow.
Wow.
Oh.
Crow was really
Wow.
good, yeah.
Yeah, it's based on a comic.
Crow was very
That's
awesome.
that's earlier in 2000, but I like it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
said
it's too late.
Yeah.
The first
Yeah,
Crow, right? Not
it's-
the other.
that rule's already been wiped.
Crow, Revenge, or
Redemption.
Crow, Bloodlust, or
Yeah.
none of that crap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
there's
just the
some
original
weird.
The soundtrack was amazing in that movie also.
The soundtrack was really good.
Yeah.
It's hard to pick one, man.
It's tight between Watchmen and Road to Perdition.
Wow.
Road to Perdition's a
Ooh,
great
I think
movie.
Road to
Yeah.
Perdition is probably my favorite movie based.
That was
on
based on a comic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
let me ask you, Justin. When did you find out?
Such a good movie.
When did you find out that was based on a comic? Did you know from the
Well
beginning?
after I saw it.
Okay, well, after you saw it.
I had no idea.
A lot of
Which
people.
made me respect it even more. Like, because you talk about a well acted movie.
Yeah.
Amazing movie, great story, well acted, and then all of a sudden there's somebody's like, that's based on a graphic novel. And I was like, what? And, just because that's so out of left field, I think that's...
Justin with the most different pick.
So that's a good note to end it on. That was good, guys. That was a good discussion.
Except for all the F-bombs.
F-bombs were heavy. Heavy and thrown loud.
You'll pay for that.
I'm a passionate person.
So I hope everyone watching, listening enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed recording it, and I hope you'll come back for our next one.
Please come back.
Please.
They'll get better.
Please.
This is the pinnacle of what we can do. Don't expect anything more.
You're looking at it.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Goodbye.
See you next time.
I'm sorry, Sean.
I will murder you.
He was like, all right, I'm sorry. And then he just did it again, and I was like, I'm sorry for doing it over.